Hi, I'm Don. Welcome to my studio.
Today we build Gunpla. I have been building Gunpla since 2008 and today I'm going to share with you all the tricks and tips and hacks on how I build Gunpla. In this video, I will share with you the Gunpla tools that you really need in the hobby because I've been accumulating a lot of tools since 2008 and I want to share with you what you actually only need to have when you're building Gunpla. And as usual, this video will be littered with tips. As much as I want to do ASMR all throughout the video, our studio is as open as a garage. By the way, my channel is supported and sponsored by all these brands. I have a discount code at usagundamstore.com. Gunpla is great because the difference with Gunpla is that they're articulated, you can play around with the model kit, and they look great even if unpainted. There are collectors who simply build the models, and there are customizers and Gunpla competition builders that create art out of these model kits. Even if you're into miniatures, I highly recommend you try to do Gunpla because they're really fun to build and they're extra fun if you paint them. Now we talk about the tools. We have accumulated a ton of tools throughout the year since 2008 when I started building Gunpla, and there are so many more in the market today. The most basic tool that you need in building Gunpla are hobby nippers. Double-edged nippers or the basic hobby nippers. I have here a couple of nippers, hobby nippers from Vallejo, and they're pretty standard nippers. These nippers are also good for cutting photo-etch parts. You also have very generic Chinese-made like nipper like this one. This is around 100 pesos and it's super cheap. I also have this rust-proof nippers from Hobbymate which does the job well, but they're not as sharp as the other nippers. Hobbymate nippers never rust though. Oh, by the way, watch until the end of the video because I'll be giving you a ton of tips and my recommendations on what tools to get. Shell are Japanese wire cutter tools, Japanese made wire cutter tools that are better options than nail nippers. Single edge nippers. They are awesome, they cut really nicely, especially if the nippers are new, but they break like crackers. The SMS single-edge nipper though is stronger or more durable than the usual single-edge nippers. Art knives. I have like a gazillion of art knives and art knife handles, but it all depends on preference. I prefer the heavier handles. I have here the Knife Pro from Tamiya, which is really good. I have this for more than like maybe 15 years now. I also have like the new premium art knife from Vallejo. They're really good too. They're magnetic and I really like the weight. Sandpapers. You'll need a lot of sandpapers. Around 600 grit if you want to remove the nub marks, and then you eventually go up to around 2,500 or even 3,000 grit sandpaper. We usually buy the really rough ones, 120, 200 grit or 200 grit, and then we buy the really smooth ones, the 2,000 and 3,000 grit. Now we move on how to build Gunpla. I always cut away from the model piece itself. Even if I do miniatures, this is the safest way to cut the model pieces away from the sprue. Use your generic or standard hobby nipper or even your wire cutter and cut it away from the sprue. If you haven't upgraded to a single edge nipper yet, you could use the same nipper and cut nearer the model piece. However, even if you have a single edge nipper, I would still recommend not to cut all the way through the model piece. It is so much easier to shave off the extra knob marks or sand it off instead of using putty to correct your mistake. Shaving off the knob marks and the mold lines with an art knife. Shaving the knob mark with the art knife takes a bit of practice, but it's the most efficient way to cut away excess knob marks. Key to using the art knife is to have fresh blades available every time you build Gunpla. Using really new and fresh blades for scraping off excess knob marks or removing the mold lines is very important, because if you're using really sharp new blades, you won't need to exert too much effort, thus it won't be prone to accident. An easier way to totally clean off the knob marks is to use a sanding sponge to remove the excess knob marks. This takes a little bit of practice because you have to make sure that the angle of your sanding sponge is similar to the angle of the plastic. I'm showing you dry sanding in this video, but I usually do wet sanding. Use around 600 grit sandpaper to easily remove the excess plastic, and then refine the sanding with 1000 grit. White Gunpla plastic is so soft and easy to clean. Now we move on to my recommendations. Colored plastic, especially the dark blue and sometimes the red, are really brittle and harder than white plastic. By the way, even if you have a single edge nipper, use the standard hobby nipper and cut it away from the model piece, and then use the single edge nipper near the model piece. This will save your single edge nipper from breakage. Trust me, I broke 5 single edge nippers already. Now we move on to wet sanding. Other than the usual dust, wet sanding produces a smoother finish in my opinion. Due to the water, the sandpaper, or here the flexi sander from Vallejo, remains fresh and very sharp when you're sanding. Simply put, if you're wet sanding, the sandpaper eats more plastic. You could vary the pressure when you're wet sanding, but if you really prefer really high grit sandpaper, you could make your own. Have a piece of acrylic plastic and put a double adhesive and add your usual sandpaper from the hardware store. Personally, I just stick to the Vallejo Flexi Sanders. They do the job really well. The 3M sanding sponges, they're really good. However, they're very flexible and they're only good over curved surfaces. Cutting male pegs. This is only important if you plan to paint your model or modify your model after snap building. You need to cut it at a diagonal around 45-degree angle, but don't cut the whole peg. Cutting the male pegs into a diagonal around 45-degree angle is very important because it will be almost impossible in some parts. If you plan to paint your model, it will be very difficult to disassemble. If you accidentally cut the male pegs too much and made the parts loose, you could simply put PVA glue during the final assembly. Tools upgrades. What pro builders use and what do you really need to enjoy this hobby? There are so many tools in the market today, and there are so many marketing poop, and we'll tell you the really important stuff in this section of the video. First, you need a normal double-edged standard nipper for cutting the sprue or the tree of the model, and you cut it away from the model. Then you need a single edge nipper. I recommend the SMS version. Art knife. What makes an art knife good? Now this boils down to personal preference. Personally, I like my art knife handle to be really weighty or heavier than usual. So I prefer my Tamiya Pro art knife and my Vallejo Premium art knife over all the 100 art knife handles that I own. Now Alpha blades are really good. They're Japanese made blades and they remain sharp longer than the usual generic blades. Also, I feel I have more control with smaller blades. So a heavy Vallejo handle plus Alpha small blade is the perfect combination. Sanding sponges. You have the display sanding sponges which are really neat and very cheap. And then you have the really good 3M sanding sponges, but both are so thin and they're only good over curved surfaces. I prefer my Vallejo Flexi sanders and the SMS sanding boards. The sanding boards are a bit rough and they're perfect for scratch building. Pinvise. Pinvises, you stick with Japanese-made Tamiya pinvises. I think I don't have to explain why Japanese-made tools are good because they're really good. I have this for 15 years now. However, it's a surprise to me that the Vallejo pinvise is even better. The Vallejo pinvise has a bigger butt and you can stand it on your desk, and it has 4 extra sizes for drill bits. So it's like buying one Vallejo pinvise for the price of 2 Tamiya pinvises. But all of these are really good. Invest slowly because these are a bit pricey, but investing on really good tools is worth it because they will last you for years. Drill bits are a bit pricey too, but I highly recommend you invest on the good ones because the cheaper alternatives, even the fancy yet not so cheap alternatives, they break easily. They're too brittle. Files. You need files especially if you do modifications on your kit already. Stick to the good quality files though. The Japanese made files and this one, the Vallejo files, are really good. Again, you only need files if you modify your kit and do a lot of changes to the armor parts and such. Chisels or panel liners, I would only recommend BMC, the standard, the Japanese-made BMC chisels, and the Korean handcrafted sub-panel liners. Both of these are really good. I have my BMCs for almost 10 years now. They're really good, but time will tell if the sub-panel liners are as good as my BMC. Oh, you may ask, what makes a chisel good? A good chisel is not about the sharpness or the design or the look of the handle. It's all about the quality of their panel line. The good chisels, the BMC and the sub panel liner, does not produce those ugly lip around the edges of your panel line. Cheaper alternatives will break easily and they produce those ugly lip that you will have to sand later or scrape off with your art knife. So cheaper tools, more work. Cement. The new Tamiya quick setting cement is awesome. It dries in half a second. The quick setting is great if you're scratch building or pla plating. For generic gluing and seam line removal, I highly recommend PU Reducer. This is around 200 pesos and you will have cement for the rest of your life. That's it, pancit. I hope you liked the video. I hope the beginners or people who are new to the hobby, or even people that are old but new to the hobby will find this video useful. I always tell this to people, even with paints, tools are the same. You invest slowly. because the good ones are a bit pricey and most of us can really buy the whole set, so you invest slowly. Better tools and better paints will last you longer. They will give you a more satisfying hobby experience because the cheaper alternatives, to be honest, will give you a lot of frustrations. But then again, it's your hobby, and it's your money, so it's all up to you. But I highly recommend you invest slowly and buy the good stuff. If not, if you don't do that, you're simply collecting crap. And trust me, I've collected a ton of crap through the years of doing Gunpla, doing miniatures and stuff like that. So I hope this video will guide you so that you won't collect crap. Oh, by the way, I'll be putting up more panel line scribing videos very soon.
That's it, we're done. I hope you liked the video. Do like, comment, subscribe, and consider joining the channel so that you'll be part of our Discord community. Saludos!